Hey guys, tonight we begin not with drama or thunder or ancient chaos, but with a morning so calm you could almost spread it on toast. Imagine Mount Cynthus, that lesser-known sibling of Olympus, basking under a linen soft sky, the kind of morning where even the clouds seem too relaxed to drift. Here, among sun-warmed olive trees and sleepy cicadas, Artemis stretches like a cat who's mastered archery. Apollo hums something gentle on his lyre, which feels odd until you remember even sun gods get sentimental before lunch. This is the story of a quarrel, not an explosive one. No lightning bolts. No boars released in passive-aggressive revenge. Just a quiet disagreement between divine twins over a clay pipe. Yes, a pipe, handmade, slightly crooked, and somehow sacred. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is. Are you in Lisbon at midnight? In a cabin in Patagonia with snow on the roof? I'd love to know where you're tuning in. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in the grove just as Artemis finishes her morning walk, her boots damp from dew, and her quiver slung low over one shoulder. She doesn't walk like a goddess. She walks like someone who's always lived outside, efficient, sure-footed, unimpressed by anything with too much shine. Apollo, on the other hand, is lounging nearby in a tunic, so crisply folded it might have been ironed by sunlight. He's surrounded by scrolls, music scrolls, charting something that sounds like dawn, smells like citrus, and apparently involves 17 different kinds of harps. They nod at you in greeting. These two never really talk to each other in the morning. Their bond is older than speech. Twins raised on godly quiet. Not small talk, but something shifts. You see it happen. There, by the sacred spring, half buried in moss and resting beside a cluster of thyme, is a small clay object. Not divine, not glowing, just curious. Artemis spots it first, crouching down with the same precision she uses to examine paw prints. Her fingers trace its rim, smudging a bit of lichen. She turns it over in her palm. A pipe, cracked at the edge, handmade, rough, but not sloppy, probably mortal, possibly ancient, definitely out of place. It smells like rosemary, she says, holding it near her nose. Apollo leans over her shoulder. And ash, is that lavender? You'd expect divine relics to shimmer, hum, or at least sparkle with the burden of prophecy. But this one smells like someone's grandfather used it by a fire while telling stories that went nowhere. And that's what makes it lovely. They say nothing, but you sense it, the tension. A little tilt in Apollo's eyebrow, a pause too long in Artemis's thumb. Then she sets it down, walks away. You think, that's the end of it. It isn't. The sun rises higher. The morning stretches like a cat in a sunbeam. Birds chirp with unnecessary optimism. And when you glance, again, the pipe is gone. Not buried, not broken, just missing. And Apollo, he's casually tucking something into the folds of his robe. You raise an eyebrow. He winks. You're beginning to realize that this day, though wrapped in golden calm, is about to unfold like a very slow, very polite comedy. Historians still debate whether the pipe was ever used, or simply ceremonial, offered to some minor shepherd god and forgotten beneath time. Others believe it was a diplomatic gift, misdelivered and misunderstood. But you know better. It was a test of divine patience and sibling pride. The sun is climbing. Apollo hums something light. Artemis ties her hair back a bit too tightly, and somewhere in Apollo's robe, a clay pipe begins its quiet, momentous journey. The sun climbs lazily over Mount Cynthus, casting gentle light across the rocks and olive branches, like it's trying not to wake anyone. The air smells of thyme, dry earth, and the faintest whiff of something smoky. You walk through the grove, careful not to step on the tiny wildflowers sprouting between the roots. Birds flutter past with the indifference of creatures who know they're immortalized in song anyway. Somewhere in the distance, a nymph is lecturing a tree for dropping leaves too early. Autumn hasn't even started. You find Apollo seated cross-legged on a woven mat, fingers absently tapping a rhythm on his knee. He's got that expression, half serene, half smug. The one he wears when he thinks he's won something nobody knows is a competition yet, and tucked snugly into the fold of his belt. The pipe. You tilt your head at him. He tilts his chin upward in return. Classic god behavior. She didn't claim it, he says, without context. It was lying there, abandoned, unloved. You nod slowly. And so, you rescued it. I preserved it, he corrects, brushing non-existent dust from his robe. Besides, I'm the god of art. This is a rustic artifact, a mortal tribute to flame and breath, and possibly herbs, and possibly ownership. You mumble. He smirks. Artemis appears shortly afterward, her tunic damp from a recent walk through mistier parts of the mountain. She eyes Apollo's hands, then his belt, then the space beside him where something is conspicuously not resting. You found it, she says evenly. I kept it, he replies. The tone is still friendly, still measured, but you can feel the fabric of tension stretching. Tight, but not tearing. Not yet. She sits across from him, plucks a fig from a nearby basket, eats it without breaking eye contact. And you sit between them, pretending to admire a snail on a mossy rock. The pipe stays in Apollo's possession for the rest of the morning. He doesn't use it, doesn't even look at it much. But you get the feeling that he's very aware it's there, like someone who's adopted a stray animal purely out of spite. Artemis, to her credit, does not confront him, not directly, but she does begin humming an old hunting song with exactly the kind of melody that drowns out lyre chords, a song that talks of cleansing smoke, wind through reed, and sharing warmth in silence. Apollo hums louder. The gods around Olympus aren't particularly surprised by this kind of energy. Passive divine tension is as common as olive oil or golden sandals. But this feels different, softer, slower, the kind of disagreement that brews like oversteeped tea. A breeze passes. You swear the pipe lets out the faintest scent of lemon balm. Historians still argue whether this was the moment the feud began or the moment it escalated. Some interpret Apollo's possession of the pipe as an artistic claim, an act of reverent preservation. Others suggest it was a power move, disguised in silk. But Artemis? She remembers how to wait. After lunch, when Apollo excuses himself for a scroll reading with the muses, he leaves the pipe behind, nestled beside his empty cup. A mortal mistake. You sit quietly. So does Artemis. Then, casually, so casually, it feels like a whisper, she picks it up. No dramatics. Just thumb and forefinger. Smooth as moonlight, she tucks it into her satchel, brushes a leaf from her lap, and stands. No triumph in her expression, just balance restored. You follow her as she strolls along the ridge, the wind behind her, tunic rustling like parchment. So, you say after a while, "What now?" "Now," she says calmly. He notices, and he does. 15 minutes later, a faint but sharp echoes from the grove. Artemis doesn't turn around. Neither do you. But you both know. The pipe has just changed hands, and changed everything. The sun is high now, stretching golden fingers across every surface, like it's trying to press pause on the world. But Olympus doesn't pause, especially not when two divine twins are pretending very hard that everything is perfectly fine. You return to the grove just in time to witness Apollo's casual re-entry. He's holding a fig, chewing slowly, contemplatively, but his eyes, they're scanning. You and Artemis are seated in the shade of a cypress tree. She's sharpening an arrowhead with the relaxed patience of someone who has already won a game. No one knew they were playing. Apollo clears his throat. She doesn't look up. "Has anyone seen that clay pipe?" he asks the air. The air does not respond. You, unfortunately, are not the air, so you offer a shrug, a neutral one, the kind diplomats practice. Apollo continues, "It was here, beside my cup. I was going to sketch it this afternoon." "Sketch it?" Artemis says mildly. "You didn't mention a sketch earlier." "I didn't want to make it a whole thing," he replies, which is Olympian code for "I absolutely wanted to make it a thing." She finishes sharpening, dusts off her hands. Perhaps it wandered off. "Pipes don't wander," he says. "Neither do quivers," she replies. "And yet yours was once found in my tent." You suppress a grin. And just like that, the passive-aggressive poetry begins. Apollo spends the afternoon composing a soft ballad about objects lost and claimed by night. The pipe is not named, but the implication is unmistakable. Artemis responds by weaving a small basket from rushes and placing it conspicuously near the hearth, with the exact dimensions of a pipe-sized relic. Empty, of course. Apollo reads his lyrics aloud near dinner. Artemis serves her soup in a clay bowl of similar lineage to mysterious pipes. You feel like you're trapped inside the world's quietest, most polite argument. And the pipe, now nestled at the bottom of Artemis's satchel, next to some moonseed and a small tin of pine resin. She's not hiding it, exactly, but she's definitely not announcing it. After dinner, the Olympians gather for their usual nothing in particular. Dionysus juggles pomegranates. Hera corrects someone's posture. Hermes tries to auction off socks he claims are enchanted. You sit beside a fig tree and watch the twins. They're not sitting together, but they're not far apart either. The kind of distance that says we're speaking, just not now. Historians still debate whether this stretch of time should be labeled a divine standoff or simply the awkward fig interval. Some manuscripts refer to it as the period of strategic breathing. You call it the calm before the retort. At some point, Apollo offers to play a lullaby, not for anyone in particular, just for the grove. His fingers move gracefully across the lyre strings, and his voice is gentle, like a lullaby wrapped in sunlight. And near the end, one subtle lyric about objects mislaid beneath the moon. Artemis stands, silently walks to the edge of the clearing, and releases an arrow into the sky, not at anything, just into the idea of silence. It lands with a soft thud far beyond view. She turns and nods. Once, not to him, not to you, just to herself, and disappears into the trees. Apollo finishes the song. The gods applaud. He bows slightly, not smiling. And you? You remain seated, because you know this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Morning returns to Mount Cynthus with the elegance of a cat that knows exactly where the sunbeam will fall. You find yourself waking beneath the same fig tree, crusted with sleep and dreams shaped like arrows and melodies. Around you, the world is still, at least until Hermes sprints past, carrying a scroll and muttering, "Not my fault, not my fault," which is always a lie. The pipe is no longer in Artemis's satchel. It now sits, quietly and unbothered, atop a smooth stone beside the spring, exactly where it was found, but turned slightly, as if it rotated itself to catch the morning light. You blink. Artemis stands near it, calm as ever. She's brushing dew off a fern, with the care of someone performing a ritual. Apollo is nowhere to be seen. "What's the plan today?" you ask. She glances at the pipe. It rests. You nod. She nods. Nothing is said until Apollo arrives. Fresh robe, new chords on his lyre, and a glint in his eye that says, "I brought lunch," but it's also a trap. He approaches with the kind of exaggerated serenity that screams, "I'm pretending nothing bothers me, and it's obviously working." "Good morning," he says brightly. "Shall we picnic?" You glance at Artemis. She lifts one eyebrow. Apollo gestures toward a blanket already spread beneath a cypress, complete with a basket of golden grapes, barley cakes, and a pitcher of ambrosia chilled with enchanted mint. You all walk there, slowly, casually, tension dressed in polite conversation. Once seated, he uncorks the pitcher and begins. "Isn't it strange," he says, "how objects can become symbols?" Artemis tilts her head. "It's stranger how people choose what to make symbolic." He replies, sipping slowly. "But aren't symbols how we build meaning?" You chew your cake. It's soft and crumbly and somehow tastes like sunshine. But even divine pastries can't distract from this duel of metaphors. "The pipe," Apollo continues, "reminds me of old temples, sacred silence, breath and smoke rising together." Artemis reaches into her cloak and retrieves a twig, begins carving it with a curved blade. "It reminds me," she says, "of fires shared by necessity, heat without hierarchy, flame without performance. That lands. Even Apollo hesitates. You pretend to study a beetle. Historians still debate whether this lunch was a peace offering or a tactical maneuver. Some argue the grapes were enchanted with sincerity. Others believe the entire picnic was meant to distract from the fact that neither twin officially had the pipe at that moment. But you know better. The pipe wasn't missing. It was between them. As the meal ends, Apollo rises and begins playing his lyre again, an improvised tune, lilting and slow. You think you recognize the theme. It's the same melody from the day before, only now with a slight change in cadence, like it's softening. Artemis doesn't speak. She just walks back to the stone, where the pipe rests. Gently, she lifts it. She does not hide it. She holds it in her palm, turning it slightly, like someone studying the shape of memory. Then she places it down again, in the center of the picnic blanket. Apollo stops playing. They both look at it, not as a prize, not as a claim, but as a placeholder of something they both understand, but don't need to name. You say nothing, because this is no longer about the object. It's about what neither of them is willing to say aloud, and what they both already know. The afternoon on Mount Cynthus stretches like a cat in a sunbeam, slow, deliberate, and utterly unwilling to rush. The pipe, now resting on the center of the picnic blanket, like a guest of honor, remains untouched. Neither twin makes a move toward it, which, of course, only makes it more powerful. Objects acquire meaning not when they're held, but when they're carefully not held. You sit nearby, trying to look casual while internally monologuing, like a court scribe watching divine diplomacy in action. Apollo lounges on his elbow, head tilted toward the sky, as if composing the next hymn to restrained indignation. Artemis is braiding a piece of bark with a strand of her own hair, a thing she does when she's either at peace or plotting vengeance, sometimes both. So, Apollo says finally, with the energy of someone launching a very soft grenade, what would you do with it if it were yours? Artemis doesn't look up. Use it. He waits for elaboration. Doesn't get one. You lean slightly toward her. Use it for what? She shrugs. Fire rituals, herbs, smoke signals, teaching fawns the meaning of patience. Apollo smirks. Sounds terribly practical. She glances at him. What would you do with it? Place it on a pedestal, he says smoothly, in a sunlit alcove, framed by laurel leaves. Maybe add an inscription. This pipe probably meant something. She mutters. You cough to cover a laugh. The thing is, they're not really fighting. They're circling, orbiting, testing the gravitational pull of memory and sentiment without daring to name it. You rise and walk around the clearing. Birds hum in the branches. Somewhere nearby, a spring babbles with the voice of a retired oracle who now only gives vague directions. The other gods begin to drift past. Hermes shows up with a tray of roasted almonds and a grin that says, I know everything, and I'm bored. He eyes the pipe. That's the one. Yes, you reply. He leans in. Do they know it's just a mortal trinket? They do. He smiles wider. Good. That makes it more dangerous. He pops an almond in his mouth and vanishes. Later, a minor goddess of pine cones wanders by, looks at the scene, sits on a rock, says nothing. By now, The sun has started its descent. The shadows have grown long and theatrical, like they're preparing for an emotional monologue. You return to the twins. The pipe hasn't moved. Would you mind if I held it? You ask. They both look at you. Identical eyes. Differing intent. Artemis nods. Apollo shrugs. You pick it up. It's light. Worn smooth in a few places. A hairline crack runs along the bowl, like a memory trying not to split. It smells faintly of pine resin, dust, and the ghost of something herbal. You turn it once in your hand and place it gently between them. Neither flinches. Historians still debate whether this gesture, your gesture, was what shifted the tone of the whole quarrel. Some claim it was a turning point in divine politics. Others believe it was a lucky accident involving sunstroke and too much almond dust. What you know is this: something changed. They both look at the pipe, and then, without speaking, look at each other, just for a moment, and that's all. No declaration, no sudden embrace, just a mutual acknowledgement, and the understanding that neither one of them needs to win. Twilight comes like a sigh across Mount Cynthus. It doesn't crash or blaze. It settles. Soft lavender light drapes over the rocks, and shadows curl themselves gently around tree trunks. The grove is quieter now, as if even the birds know the day is winding down and don't want to interrupt. You sit near the hearth. It's a modest one, just a circle of stones with slow-burning olive wood, but it gives off a cozy crackle that's been attracting more than just heat seekers. Gods, nymphs, and one particularly nosy tortoise have all drifted by to sit in its warmth. The pipe lies in the center, again, no longer on the picnic blanket, nor in anyone's possession, just there. Watching? No, but very, very present. Apollo arrives first tonight. He's brought a bundle of scrolls tied with golden ribbon, clearly meant to look like they were accidentally brought. He doesn't sit immediately. He circles the fire once, then chooses a log that puts him across from the pipe, not beside it. Artemis follows soon after. She doesn't bring anything except a folded shawl made of soft lunar wool, which she tosses onto her shoulders with the indifference of a goddess who always sleeps well. She nods at you, at him, not at the pipe. You notice something different. No tension, no circling, no performance. They're just there. You warm your hands by the fire, careful not to stare at the pipe too long, as if it might mistake you for someone trying to own it again. Do you remember, Apollo says eventually, when we found that flute made of bird bones? Artemis smiles faintly. It squeaked more than it sang. You told everyone it was enchanted. You believed me. He laughs quietly. You sip something warm from a clay cup. It's mint and lemon balm, and just the right temperature to make. Your bones remember they're allowed to rest. They continue reminiscing, nothing dramatic, just bits of their shared youth. Hunting races, a failed poetry contest. That time they disguised themselves as clouds and scared a whole fleet of sailors into writing hymns. And always, the pipe remains in the middle, like a punctuation mark neither of them is ready to erase. Historians still wonder whether this night marked a resolution or simply a truce. Some claim the pipe took on symbolic weight as a stand-in for divine communication, an artifact that reminded even gods they could disagree gently. Others say it meant nothing at all. But you watch Apollo lean back, arms behind his head. You watch Artemis pour tea from a kettle, balanced on two stones. And you see it clearly. The pipe is no longer the point. It's the pause, the shared object that let them listen instead of speak, sit instead of choose. I don't think I want it anymore, Artemis says softly. Apollo nods. Me neither. They say nothing else, but it feels complete. And the pipe? Still there, still watching. Probably. You let your body soften into the ground, the warmth of the fire curling around your toes. Above you, the stars are beginning to arrive. No parade, no grand fanfare, just appearing one by one, like guests who know the door is always open. You close your eyes, and you hear the faintest creak of old clay as the pipe settles into the dust. The night deepens like ink, soaking into parchment. You are still at the hearth, though the fire has mellowed into glowing embers, the kind that pulse rather than flame, the kind of light that doesn't ask to be seen. It simply is. Above, the sky has turned into an ancient ceiling, painted with stars, not sharp and glittering, but soft, like candlelight reflected in silver. The pipe hasn't moved. No one has touched it since that near whisper of mutual surrender between the twins. But now it seems settled, not as an object of contention, but as part of the setting, like a stone or a bench or a shadow that knows where it belongs. You stretch your legs. Nearby, Apollo is plucking at a reed flute, absent-mindedly working out a tune that never quite finishes itself. Artemis, seated opposite him, is carving a bit of pine wood into a whistle. Neither speaks. The air is cool, sweet with night herbs. Somewhere in the grove, a fox pads quietly across moss. You hear it before you see it. A low rustle, then nothing. You rise and take a slow walk around the perimeter of the grove. You pass the stone where the pipe was first found, still kissed with dew, still a little sacred, if only because something started there. In a patch of moonlight, you pause and remember that swan cloak incident, the invisible lyre string, the mirror-polished sandals that reversed left and right for 2 full days. It's not that Artemis and Apollo like fighting, it's that they like not agreeing, but in ways that test each other's stillness rather than their storms. You head back to the fire, where Hermes has now appeared again, with something bundled under his arm. Evening, he says, sliding into a cross-legged seat, like the world owes him gravity. What's that? You ask, nodding to the bundle. He grins. A suggestion. He unwraps the cloth and reveals a second clay pipe, slightly different in shape, fresher, not glazed, but similar, familiar. I made it, he says. It's a replica. You raise an eyebrow. I watched them for 3 days. Hermes explains, smug. I've had enough time to sculpt a temple. Artemis glances up. Apollo lowers his flute. You're missing the point, she says. I am the point, he replies. She actually smiles. Apollo chuckles. What's your plan then? Hermes shrugs. Offer it. Let you both not claim it again. He sets the new pipe next to the original. They look like cousins, Close, but not identical. One worn and real, the other smooth, slightly damp with fresh earth. No one moves, but no one complains. Historians, of course, were utterly baffled by the discovery of two identical clay pipes in later records, one carved with faint lunar symbols, the other with sun lines, both bearing traces of olive ash. Most scholars agree this moment was the beginning of the twin pipe mystery, a period in which both Artemis and Apollo were known to refer to our pipe without further clarification. Back in the grove, the fire snaps softly. You lean closer, your fingers nearly brushing the older pipe, not to take it, just to feel it, as you would a stone worn smooth by years of passing hands. They're just pipes, you say. Exactly, Artemis whispers, and for the first time in days, both twins look at each other without weight, just wonder. Dawn returns shyly. No dramatic entrance, no golden flare, just a gradual blooming of light along the horizon, like Olympus is being slowly remembered by the sun. You're awake before most. The hearth is quiet, the embers like faint echoes of yesterday's warmth. You stretch beneath your shawl and glance toward the center of the circle. The pipes are still there, side by side now, like twins in their own right. One worn, one new, neither touched. But something has changed. Artemis is already awake too, crouched a few steps away, feeding a little bowl of seeds to a pair of doves. She hums, not a song, but a rhythm, earthy, ancient, the kind of hum that settles into your bones before it reaches your ears. Apollo joins a few moments later, rubbing sleep from his eyes with theatrical precision, as if awakening from a dream filled with harp solos and tasteful applause. He sees the pipes. He smiles. You think, briefly, about the origin of the quarrel. How small it was. How ordinary. How human. Just two people. Yes, gods, but still people, drawn to the same humble object. Not because of power or glory, but because it felt familiar, forgotten, gentle. That's what made it valuable. Hermes reappears, because of course he does. He's carrying a tray of tea, 3 cups, though he doesn't drink his. Peace tea, he announces. You raise an eyebrow. It's just lemon balm and mint, he admits. But it's in a peace shape. You don't ask what that means. You all sit together, the 4 of you, drinking tea, letting silence be. A breeze moves through the grove, rustling leaves with soft insistence. One of the doves hops closer to the pipes, sniffs one, pecks it gently. It chooses the older one to sit beside. Artemis says nothing. Apollo chuckles softly. Do you remember, he says, when we tried to make our own instruments as kids? With turtle shells, Artemis replies, and stolen strings. They sounded like regret. They sounded like us. You lean back and close your eyes. Because this is it. Not the climax, not the resolution, but the glow, the warmth that lingers when you realize a thing doesn't have to be resolved to be understood. Historians later named this period the quiet truce of Synthis. Some believe the twins signed a nonverbal treaty. Others claim the second pipe was the turning point. But you were here, and you know. The turning point wasn't the pipe. It was the pause, the stillness shared in the middle of things, a place where words weren't needed, where breath and tea and bird feathers were enough. The fire crackles, a new log settles in place, and the doves, they both fall asleep. Side by side, you spend the rest of the morning in that same soft orbit, neither rushing nor lingering too long. It's the kind of time that doesn't move forward so much as settle deeper, like tea leaves soaking into warm water. The twins have drifted apart, for now, but not out of avoidance, just ease. Artemis has gone off toward the eastern cliffs, where the wind is sharper and the air tastes like salt and distance. She walks barefoot, collecting small stones without really looking at them. The pipe doesn't go with her. It stays. Apollo is nearby in the grove, lying in a sunbeam that somehow knows how to follow him. His lyre rests on his stomach like a sleepy cat. Occasionally, he plucks a note that doesn't become a song, just lingers. And you sit by the hearth again, watching both pipes. No one has touched them since the tea. You wonder, are they sacred now? Not because of origin, but because of what they withstood. The younger gods have started to notice. You hear whispers. A dryad calls them the twin offerings. A satyr suggests placing them on a shared pedestal. A muse sketches them together, labeling the drawing Peace Without Conclusion. You're not sure the twins would appreciate the sentiment, but they probably wouldn't correct it either. That afternoon, a few minor deities gather for a light discussion on ambiguous ownership in divine relationships. They cite the pipe case, naturally. You're quoted, misquoted. Your silence becomes legendary. Hermes, ever opportunistic, begins carving miniature replicas of the pipes out of fig wood and selling them near the spring. You watch Artemis walk back into the grove. She passes Hermes, accepts a replica with a nod, and drops it in a nearby fountain without breaking stride. Apollo sees the whole thing. He bursts out laughing, and just like that, something cracks, not in a bad way, but in that wonderful, relieving, finally kind of way. Artemis joins him, reluctantly at first, then fully. They laugh until they can't breathe, until Artemis leans against a tree, and Apollo sits down hard, like the gravity of amusement finally caught up with him. You realize it's the first time since the pipe appeared that they've both looked younger and lighter and a little bit mortal. Historians still argue if this moment marks the formal end of the pipe incident. Some say the laughter was rehearsed. Others believe Hermes hired a goat to provoke the chuckle. But you don't need a scroll to know. This was the resolution, not a speech, not a handshake, just a shared joke, and two gods remembering that they've always been better together, not despite their differences, but because of them. The fire crackles again. You sip another cup of tea, and when you glance back at the center of the hearth, something catches your eye. The older pipe? It's turned ever so slightly toward the younger one. By now, the pipes are part of the landscape. Not relics, not metaphors, just things that live here now, like the moss on the stones, or the sunbeam that always finds Apollo's shoulder, or the single fig that refuses to fall from the tree above. Artemis's preferred seat. You're reclining on a woven mat near the hearth, basking in that golden, post-laughter atmosphere, the kind of mood that drapes itself over everyone, like a warm blanket that smells faintly of thyme and roasted almonds. The gods have drifted in and out all day. No one asks about the pipes anymore. They just notice them, acknowledge them with a nod, a glance, a half smile. At one point, Dionysus walks by, tips his cup toward the older pipe, and mutters, "That thing saw more restraint than I ever have," before wandering off to replant his grapevines in a different spot. For aesthetic purposes, Hermes, still in full entrepreneurial swing, has now expanded to pipe-shaped brooches and one questionable tapestry. When you ask what the tapestry depicts, he says, "Symbolic compromise, and also goats." You don't ask for clarification. Later, in the afternoon, Artemis prepares tea again. She doesn't announce it. She just does it, like her hands remembered something before her mouth had to explain it. The kettle goes on the stones. The scent of chamomile and crushed laurel fills the air. Apollo brings figs, not the flashy kind, just the sweet, ripe ones he knows she prefers. He sets them down beside the cups and hums a low, wordless tune. It's the same melody he played earlier, but now with a softer ending. You all sit. You don't speak. You don't need to. And then, something even stranger happens. Apollo picks up the new pipe. Artemis picks up the old one. They don't look at each other. They don't perform. They simply hold the pipes. Not like prizes or possessions, but like stories. Fragile ones. Stories that haven't ended, but have finally stopped asking for a climax. They examine them in silence, noticing new things. Tiny scratches, faint fingerprints, one slightly chipped corner. Then Artemis places hers gently in the firelight. Not the fire, just the glow. And Apollo mirrors the gesture, side by side. Again, you can't help it. You lean forward slightly, and that's when Apollo says, in his sun-warmed voice, "We could pass them on." Artemis looks at him, then at you, then at the grove. "Not now," she says, "but someday." You nod, because that makes sense. These pipes aren't really theirs anymore. They're everyone's, not to hold, but to learn from. Historians call this moment the offering of breath. Some believe the pipes were eventually gifted to a mortal child who could speak with wind. Others think they were planted in soil and grew into twin olive trees that never bore fruit, but always offered shade. No one really knows. You were there. You remember how Artemis stood up after tea, wiped her hands on her tunic, and said nothing, and how Apollo followed, brushing dirt from his knees, like a man stepping away from something gently sacred. The sun began to set. The pipes remained where they were, and you sat there longer than you expected, because the space between them suddenly felt like the quietest temple in the world. Evening slips back over the grove, like an old friend pulling up a chair. By now, the day's sharpness has melted away. The light is cooler, dusted with silver. The pipes are still resting in the hearth's glow. No longer under watch, no longer the subject of divine tension, but simply there, present, quiet. You're alone for a while, not abandoned, just given space. The kind of space that only comes after a long breath, a final laugh, and the comfortable silence that follows understanding. The twins have wandered off, separately but peacefully. Apollo went west, toward the golden cliffs where light clings a little longer. Artemis disappeared into the trees, her footsteps silent, as if the forest recognized her rhythm and moved aside. You stay and watch and listen. A breeze moves through the olive trees with a hush, like someone closing a curtain. A cricket begins its cautious evening rehearsal. Somewhere in the distance, a spring gurgles, like it's trying to remember an old song. Then Hermes returns, of course. He sits down beside you without asking, hands you a handful of roasted chickpeas, and nods toward the pipes. So, he says, which one wins? You don't answer. You don't need to. He grins. Exactly. He throws a chickpea at one of the pipes. It bounces off harmlessly. I tried to sell the story of the great pipe dispute to the bards, he says. They wanted explosions, betrayals, epic speeches. You shrug. They missed the point. They always do. He stays a while, then leaves, quietly, like even he knows this part of the story doesn't belong to him. Later, the fire crackles again, and Artemis returns. She doesn't speak. She just sits, stretches her legs out toward the warmth, and takes a deep breath that smells like pine and dusk. Apollo arrives soon after, holding a small bundle of rosemary. He tosses it into the fire. It hisses, then releases a cloud of scent that wraps around the whole grove like an invisible blanket. They look at the pipes, and then at each other. Then Artemis speaks, first time in hours. It's not about who had it first. Apollo nods, or who held it last. They glance at you, and then, without fanfare, they each reach for a pipe, not possessively, but like someone retrieving a story they've both heard too many times not to tell together. They swap just once and place them back. Now, the old pipe sits where the new one did, and the new one rests where the old one lay. A simple exchange, and somehow that feels like a blessing. Historians call this moment the exchange of ashes, or the final gesture. But you know it wasn't final. It wasn't even a gesture. It was enough. You lie back. The stars are fully out now, and for the first time, you realize there is no lesson to be found in the pipe story. No epic moral, no ancient warning, just breath and presence, and two siblings who remembered gently how to share space again. The grove sleeps. Not the kind of mortal sleep that drools and snores, but the godly sort, the hush that settles over a place when even Olympus knows not to interrupt. The fire has shrunk to coals. They glow like tiny memories, pulsing beneath the ash. The pipes lie nearby, now crossed slightly, not by accident, not quite on purpose either, just naturally. You don't know who moved them. Maybe the wind, maybe something smaller. The night is full of those quiet movements. A moth circles the edge of the hearthlight. A fig falls from the tree with a sound no louder than a blink. A nearby owl calls once and is answered by silence. You sit alone again, but it's the good kind of alone. The kind that means everything has been said. Then, footsteps, soft ones. Artemis returns first, her hood drawn, the moonlight catching in the white of her tunic. She nods, not to you, to the grove, like she's thanking it for keeping everything where it belongs. She settles in near the coals, palms open to the warmth. Her breath is slow. You notice the tiniest smudge of ash on her wrist, like she touched the fire earlier without meaning. Then Apollo. He hums his way into the scene, his voice a low melody that doesn't ask to be remembered. He doesn't sit across from Artemis this time. He sits beside her. The two of them say nothing. They just are. You pull your blanket tighter. Somewhere in your chest, a knot you didn't know was there begins to loosen. The pipes rest between them, one turned slightly to the left, the other leaning right, like two knees touching beneath a shared blanket. Eventually, Apollo speaks. "I think we overestimated its importance," Artemis responds, "or underestimated our own." They don't look at each other. They don't need to. You know that kind of bond. The one where speaking aloud feels redundant. Then, something unexpected. Apollo picks up a stick, draws a little circle in the ash, around the pipes. A symbol? A boundary? A joke? Maybe all three. Artemis adds a line, a crescent like a moon tucked into the curve of the circle. You find yourself smiling. This is not resolution. It's evolution. Historians still whisper about the ash drawing. Most agree it was symbolic. Some think it marked a truce. Others say it was a shared spell, a sigil of peace. But some believe, quietly, reverently, that it was nothing more than art. Two siblings, doodling. The fire hisses. You lie back, let the stars take your weight. And when you glance one last time at the center of the hearth, the pipes are gone, not taken, just no longer needed, because the story no longer lives in clay. It lives here, in the silence, in the firelight, in the space that was held, and finally released. You wake before the sun. There's that particular shade of sky, neither night nor morning, when Olympus feels closest to the real world, like the air hasn't decided if it wants to be mist or memory. You stretch quietly, so as not to disturb the hush. The grove looks different in this light, not changed, exactly, just revealed, as if all the posturing and politeness of divine drama has finally dissolved into something softer, truer. The pipes are back. They lie on a flat stone beside the hearth, parallel now, with just a finger's width between them. You smile when you see it. That's close enough to mean something, without saying it outright. No one else is up, not even Hermes. You have the whole grove to yourself, and for the first time, you let yourself sit exactly where Artemis sat, where Apollo sat, right between them. It's not a throne, it's not a pedestal, it's just a place, and that's enough. The sun begins to creep up over the horizon, brushing gold across the tops of trees. The pipes glow gently in the light, just briefly, as if to say, we're still here, but we don't need to be watched anymore. You pick one up. You don't know which, because it doesn't matter. There's no old one, no new one, no yours, no mine, just clay, shaped by heat, softened by time, and now cool again. You exhale into it, just air, no smoke, but it still feels like an offering. Later, Artemis joins you. She doesn't sit. She just walks past, brushing your shoulder lightly, with her hand like someone tagging you out of a dream. A few minutes later, Apollo appears, still blinking sleep from his eyes. He nods toward the pipes, now resting once more on the stone. He doesn't touch them. Neither of them does. Because now, the story isn't about them. It just includes them. Historians speculate that the pipes were eventually stored in a small shrine. Others say they were hidden in a tree that never dropped its leaves. Some even believe they were passed from god to god, each adding a small mark before passing them on. But here's what you know. They were never passed. They were left. On purpose. So someone like you could find them, hold them, and maybe understand that sometimes stories don't end. They just learn how to rest. By midday, the grove is gently humming with life again. Not loudly, not frantically, just enough for the air to feel lived in. The twins move through the space like they always have. Gravitational forces disguised as people. Their presence bends the mood around them, but no one minds. Today they don't glow. They just belong. You're seated beneath the fig tree, the same one that's been watching this entire quiet drama unfold. A breeze rustles its leaves, scattering a few down, like lazy applause. The pipes are still on the stone. No one has touched them since morning, but their presence is no longer mysterious, no longer magnetic. It's more like a candle that no longer needs to be lit to give off warmth. Apollo passes you with a jug of cool water refilled from the spring. He offers you a sip. You take it. It tastes of a limestone and time and something like relief. Artemis arrives from the forest with a basket of fresh herbs, rosemary, fennel, something that might be mint, or might be a plant that once tricked a goat into flying. She sets the basket down near the fire. They sit across from each other, not in challenge, in rhythm. They begin preparing a meal. Nothing fancy. Bread, herbs, olives, pressed earlier that week, a little cheese, a clay bowl passed between them. No words exchanged, but hands moving in perfect timing. The pipes remain between them, and then, slowly, Artemis picks one up, turns it over once, wipes a thumb across its surface, sets it on the table beside the bread. Apollo picks up the other, taps it once on the stone, gently, places it beside the olives. No tension, just ceremony. They eat together, and laugh, and share figs. You almost forget the pipes are even there, until a young nymph walks past and pauses. She sees them, tilts her head. "What are those?" she asks. Apollo says, "Stories." Artemis says, "Smoke." You say, "Both." She nods and continues on. Historians will write endlessly about this lunch, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. They'll speculate on the significance of the positioning, the order of gestures, even the type of olive served. But you know better. This wasn't performance, it was release. The moment the objects stopped being the center and became simply part of the circle. That afternoon, the pipes are moved, not to a pedestal, not to a shrine, but to the edge of the hearth, placed side by side on a folded cloth, still visible, still near, but no longer between. And just like that, the space opens, the story expands, the grove exhales. Evening returns for the final time in this story, not with fanfare, not with finality, but with the graceful weight of a curtain being drawn at the end of a quiet performance. You're still here, beneath the fig tree, the last shadows of the day stretching long across the grove like sleepy limbs. The sun bleeds out behind the hills in ribbons of coral and blue. The fire has returned, not blazing, but calm, familiar. The twins sit beside it, not across from each other anymore, beside each other, shoulder to shoulder, like the night decided it was time to stop dancing around the point. The pipes remain nearby, on their cloth at the hearth's edge, not watched, not guarded, just present, like the last note of a song you don't need to play again. No one touches them. No one needs to. The grove has become something new, not just a place where gods argued politely over handmade artifacts. It's a memory now, a shared shape, a space that holds silence as gently as sound. Apollo tunes his lyre, but doesn't play. Artemis braids a blade of grass, then undoes it, then braids it again. The fire crackles, and in the center of all this, without declaration, without magic, the pipes begin to fade, not disappear, not vanish in smoke, but fade the way meaning does when it's fulfilled. When something that was once carried becomes set down, you feel it more than you see it. Their weight lessens, their purpose dissolves, and what's left is something purer. Two gods, two stories, one long breath between them. Apollo finally speaks. I think we never wanted to own it. No, Artemis says softly, just not to be left out of it. You nod, because that's the truth, isn't it? Sometimes the thing we fight over isn't the object, it's the part of ourselves it reflects. Historians, of course, never agree on when the argument ended. Some say it faded during the tea. Others insist it was the ash drawing. A few still insist there was no argument at all, merely a symbolic exercise in divine curiosity. But the grove knows, and you watched it happen. You watched a pipe become a mirror, and a mirror become a bridge. And now, there's just a circle of warmth, a fire still flickering, a fig tree that has finally, mercifully, let go of its last fruit, and two siblings sitting quietly beside it all, together, at peace. So now, close your eyes. Let go of the shape of the story, the voices, the fire, the sky. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let the day unspool behind you like a thread that no longer needs to be tied. You're safe here, in a grove where nothing shouts, where arguments dissolve not in thunder, but in laughter shared over olives and tea, where clay pipes rest side by side, not owned, not displayed, just remembered. You can feel the stillness settling in. It's not empty, it's full of everything that didn't need to be said, of glances exchanged, of breaths shared. The fire glows faintly, casting long shadows that stretch gently toward you, like quiet arms offering a blanket. Above, the stars return, one by one, not to dazzle, but to keep watch. And you're part of this now, not as a witness, as a thread woven into the fabric of stillness. So rest. Let the grove hold you. Let the fire warm what needs warming. And know that some stories don't end with a lesson. They end with presence and peace and a night that doesn't ask you to do anything except breathe